Welcome back. In this session, we look at list, tuple, and dictionary. So we'll look at list first. List is a sequence of values that can be of any type. You can add, delete, or modify elements in a list. Elements in the list are separated by a comma and they can be accessed via index. So the index of list starts at 0. So the first element will be at index 0, second element would be index 1, and so on. So let's quickly create a list. Now creating a list is very simple. So whatever you put in this square bracket, now that will become a element of a list. So you'll have to separate. If you want to add more elements to a list, you will have to separate them by comma. So let's go ahead and add some data. So I'll say football. Now just added some random data here. I have 3 strings, I have a number, and then I have a list here. So you can create a list within a list. I'll call this as, let's say, list 1. Now I'll execute this. Now the list 1 is created. Now you can add elements to the list by using a method called as append. So I'll say append, and then whatever you want to add, you can put it here. Now this element will be added at the end. So if you execute this, and then if you want to print what is there in the list, you will see 10 is added at the end. Now you can also remove the elements from a list. Let's say I want to remove cricket from here. So cricket is at index 1, this is index 0, this is index 1. So I'll have to pass the index value to a method called as pop. Let's say I'll say list1 dot pop, and I'll pass 1, and then cricket will be removed. If you want to see what is there in the list, you will do a print, and then you will find that cricket is missing. Now instead of passing the index, you can also pass the value. Let's say I want to remove tennis, so I can do that by using a method called as remove. I'll say remove, and I'll pass this value, and then you will see that tennis is removed. So if you do a print, you will not see tennis here. So that is how you can add an element, you can remove an element. Now you can also make changes to the element. Let's say I want to change this, I want to update this to tennis. So all I have to do is I'll have to find out what the index of this. Now the index is at 1, so I'll say list1 of 1. So this would be the index, and I will simply assign the value 10. So I'll execute this, and then I'll see what is there here. You will see 10 is updated here. Now there's no volleyball here. The volleyball is been replaced by tennis. Now as mentioned, the elements of a list can be accessed by index. Let's say I want to access this element. I'll say list1 of 0. Similarly, if I want to access this is at index 3, I'll say index 3, and I'll access this. Now if you observe here, this is again a list, so you can actually traverse through this list as well. So if I want to access this is as element 1, so 0 1, then I'll have to say list 3 and 1, and then you will find this one. Now you can also traverse through the list. You can iterate through all the elements in a list using a for loop. Now we'll see about for loop a little later, but for now, for is for iterating through the elements in a list. So let's say this is a syntax for I in, and I'll pass the list. So what this means is, for every element in the list, it will traverse through element, and it will take each element and it will assign it to I. So it will go through this list, it will take the first element and it will assign it to football, and then whatever you give here, I am adding a simple code. I print of I, so football will be stored in I, and then it will be printed out. So I, again, it will go through the next element in the list, it will take tennis and it will print it. So if you go ahead and execute this, you will see all the elements of a list being printed here. So this is how you can access you can iterate through the list. Now if you want to find out the elements in a list and the count of elements in a list, you can use the length method. I'll say list1 of length, and it will show me the number of elements in the list, which is 4. You can also reverse the list. I'll use the method reverse. So what it does, it will reverse the elements in the list, and then if you want to go and find out the elements, you will say a list 1, and you will see age and place which were initially the final element, the last element of the list. They have been reversed here, and you'll see them at index 0. So this is what I wanted to cover about list. Next we will see tuple. Now tuple is very similar to a list. They're also a sequence of elements, and they can be accessed via index. The basic difference between tuple and list is tuple are immutable. Now list, you can add an element, you can remove an element, you can delete an element. However, in tuple you cannot add an element, you can't delete an element, or you cannot make any changes to the element. So when you create a tuple, whatever the elements in the tuple, that will remain as it is. So creating a tuple is very similar to that of list. So I'll take the same example. Let me just take this, I'll copy this. Now this is a list, so what I'll do is I'll remove the square bracket and I will replace it with this bracket. Now this will become a tuple. Now let me change the name as list2. I'll execute this. Now this is a tuple. Now you can traverse through the tuple just like you can traverse through a list. So let's say I want to find out the element at index 1. I can do this and I'll see. Now I can also traverse through the tuple just like list using the for loop. Now unlike list, tuple cannot be changed. So if you want to make any changes to this will give me an error. So tuple object does not support item assignment. So that's the basic difference between a tuple and a list. Now let's discuss about dictionary. Dictionary is a collection of items unordered. They are basically a key value pair. So what is key value pair? Let's say name. Let's take this example, name Robin. Now this is a key value pair. It has a key called name and it has its value called Robin. So if you want to know the name, so if you say, hey, what is the name here? It will produce an output Robin. So this is how you will use dictionary. You will have a key, you will have a value associated with the key, and in order to know the value you will have to give the key name. So if I say key, if I say dictionary of name, I'll get the value Robin. So let's create a dictionary. I'll call it as diction1. Dictionaries are represented by a flower brackets. So let me quickly create some data for this. I'll say name, I'll say Robin, and I'll create another element. I'll say age 32, I'll say country, and I'll say India. I'll execute this. Now if I want to find out the value for this name, I'll have to say dictionary of name and it will give me the value. So if I want to find out the age, I will say dictionary of age and it will give me its value. Now let's say I'm looking for something called as hobby. Now hobby is not there, right? So it will throw me an error like this. Now let's say I'm not doing any logic changes here. I'm just trying to find out the value for hobby. If it is not there, I don't want the code to break. Rather, I would want a message saying that, hey, hobby is not, or just not found. So I can achieve that. Using a method called as get. So I'll have to pass the key here, and then if the key is not found, what is the message that you want to pass? I'll say not found. So because hobby is not found, instead of breaking the code, it will just simply say not found. Now if I replace this hobby, if I look for name, because name is found, it will just give me the value for that name, so which is Robin. Now similar to list, you can find the number of elements using a method called as len. So if I execute this, it will give me the number of elements, which is 3. We can also traverse through the list. So now before that, if I want to find out the keys of a dictionary, I can do so by using the method keys. As you can see, all the keys are printed here. Similarly, you can also get all the values here using the values method. Now you can also traverse through the dictionary using the for method. So for I in dictionary, let's say I want to print all the keys, so I'll say keys, and I'll print them. I will also, if I want to access all the elements, if I want to check all the values, I'll say values, then you will see all the values right here. So this is pretty much I wanted to cover in this. I hope this was clear, and I'll see you guys in the next class.